When I was 8, I spent a lot of time in my parents' living room in Uganda teaching my imaginary class. In my left hand, I held a stick. In my right, I clutched a piece of chalk. I yelled at the kids when they were not paying attention. I walked around, checking in on their work, and yes, I spanked them hard when they made mistakes. The good news is that I was the only human being in the living room. The bad news is that my mother had to replace her sofa set. I was merely imitating what I'd absorbed from my teachers. I'd learned from them that in order to be a successful student, I had to avoid mistakes. I'd also learned to avoid my inner life. When we buried my mother, an aunt of mine said, "If I hear you thinking of her, it will be you and me," a phrase in our language that meant I would be in trouble. "Just focus on your books," she said, and so I did. When I passed the Uganda national exams with flying colors, the adults around me celebrated my test scores, but what they could not see was my own inner turmoil. I was succeeding by denying my own need for support. And so when 10 years later, I attended a youth leadership program at the United World College, a high school in Canada, and the first male coordinator, the first adult male coordinator I saw was wearing an earring and thermal underwear, which to me looked like women's tights. I found myself thinking, I am an evangelical Christian and I'm going to be taught by a bunch of atheists and homosexuals. What have I thrown myself into? This was the first time that the program confounded my expectations, but it certainly wasn't the last. I thought we were going to sit in auditoriums watching PowerPoint presentations on how to be a great leader. Instead, we found ourselves in the middle of a forest discussing the war on indigenous ways of life and the war against their ways of life. My mistakes were welcome in this environment, and they were even celebrated because I could learn from them. Where I expected to be told what to do, I was invited to ask my own questions and to imagine my own answers in the world. But I certainly will never forget the day when I finally recognized what that truly meant. We were standing in a meadow, and David, the coordinator with the earring, had tied two ends of a heavy rope together, formed a circle with it on the ground, and asked all 65 male members of our community to stand around it, pick it up, and pull outward hard to make the tautest circle we could. He then said, if you've never been authentically supported by other men in your life, step into the circle. 7 guys stepped in. I felt the butterflies in my stomach, but I held myself back. I didn't know whether I could share something personal in a learning environment, let alone risk being laughed at by a group of other males for expressing myself. He made the invitation again. If you've never been authentically supported by other men in your life, step into the circle. Still, I didn't move. I didn't know whether I could trust my peers with some of my own life struggles. But when David made the invitation for the third and last time, if you've never been authentically supported by a group of other males before, step into the circle. I didn't want to move in the world with my struggles unnoticed and unacknowledged anymore. And so I stepped in. Our task was to climb onto the rope and walk around the circle in midair, keeping our balance with our hands on the other guy's shoulders. I could see the veins bulging out of my peers' hands, sweat dripping down their faces as they pulled, like my life depended on it. On the outside, I was suspended. On the inside, I was suspended. When I came back to my original spot and stepped off the rope, I sobbed like my heart had been ripped open. I had realized that for the first time in my life, my own inner life was encouraged and welcomed in a learning environment. That I could mourn my mother without shame. That these people who did not share my own beliefs of right and wrong were not doomed for hell. That I didn't have to buy the messages I'd internalized about what it means to be a man in my own culture, messages at the root of violence towards self and the other. While I stood there and wept, David came up to me, hugged me, and whispered, "I got you, brother." By the end of the program, it felt like somebody had given my life back to me. I found myself thinking, why has it taken 17 years of my life to feel alive about an educational experience? I returned to school believing for the first time that I could think something up and make it happen, not just for myself, but for my community too. What was different? I had recognized that I didn't have to hide my ideas, my thoughts, my uncertainties, my voice from the world just to be a successful student. Since then, I have worked with Partners for Youth Empowerment to design education programs for 14 to 18-year-olds in Uganda. Participant after participant says something of the version, I discovered a whole new side to myself I didn't know existed. What these testimonials are screaming is that young people need an education system in their lives that supports adults to partner with them, not to quash their potential, but to ignite the spark of their curiosity. I come from a country where 80% of the population is under the age of 35. These youth are growing up in a system that has made incredible strides to get young people into schools, and rightly so. But this same system, employers in Uganda say, fails to instill in youth the so-called soft skills of creativity, collaboration across lines of difference, of idealism. I was 17 when I realized that these skills were crucial for my success, not just in school, but also in life. If a 3-week program could change what I thought I was capable of, imagine what could happen if we use our resources, our research, our innovation to create an education system that helps young people, not just the rich and the privileged, but all of them, to feel alive about their own education. Today, young people are standing suspended on a rope, and they are counting on us to hold it taut because their lives depend on it. If we can get each young person on this planet access to a transformative education, we will leave this world a much better place for those who will be here long after we are gone. A deep bow to all the young people in this room and around the world, and the adults who are partnering with them to make a difference the best ways they know how. Thank you.